Welcome to another episode of Christian Combatives. I'm your host and servant in Jesus Christ, Paladin Actual. Today I want to talk with you guys about the kinds of cups or chalice that you use during communion. And if you use one of these or one of these big chalices or one of these glass ones, and why you might do this. Now, my main goal in this video is not for you to come across with this idea of big cup good, small cup bad. I'm not talking about that. What I want you to do is think about why. Why are you using one cup instead of another? Why would you use this cup instead of this cup? Why would you use this cup instead of this cup? Why? What might this confess? What might this do? Maybe there's a practical consideration. Maybe there's biblical considerations. Maybe there's historical considerations. So let's get into it. So first and foremost, let's talk about plastic cups because I think that this, okay, you've seen this. This is a plastic cup. This is a glass individual cup. There's also versions of these plastic cups where they're like filled with wine, unfortunately sometimes with grape juice, which is not the Lord's Supper, not able to be used in the Lord's Supper. And they got like a little thing of bread like on top of it, and it's like a self-serve thing. Now, if you're in a situation where you're like a chaplain and you're downrange and that's the only thing you have available to you, okay, this is, it's bread and it's wine, the body and blood of Christ. That's what happens. The blood of Christ is in whatever vessel you have it in. But if you have the opportunity, you should really consider why you would use one over another. If a protein shaker cup is the only cup you have to do communion with, it's still the Lord's Supper. But why might you want to use a cup dedicated to the Lord's Supper instead of just a solo cup or whatever plastic cup you have around? So talking about plastic cups, if you were a church, you're not downrange, you're not in Iraq, this isn't the only thing available to you, and you're using plastic cups, I would encourage you please to reconsider. Because with these plastic cups, you've got, people drink the blood of Christ is in here. And it's not just that the cups themselves are cheap, but also that you're throwing it away. And what happens when you're throwing away these individual cups? Do you have the blood of Christ still in it? Even if you don't believe that the blood of Christ is still, if the consecration just stops, if it undoes itself and now it's just wine and not wine and the blood in with and under the wine, you're still taking what you were having for communion, you're throwing it in the garbage. So if a possibility is that you're throwing the blood of Christ in the garbage, maybe reconsider what you're doing. Even if that's not what you're doing, is that what it looks like to other people as well? You have to consider not just what you do, why you do it, but also how other people might see what you do. So I encourage you guys, please do not use disposable cups. And if you are, for whatever reason, using disposable cups, please wash them out. Reverently dispose of the blood of Christ in some dedicated way. Don't just pour it down the drain. Don't just pour it in the sewer. But wash these out before you discard them. Now, again, if you're washing these out anyway, you may as well use a reusable cup like glass. But let's get into some more details about it. Let's talk about individual cups. You'll usually see a tray of cups. It'll be like a brass or gold tray. It'll have a bunch of these things in kind of in a circular pattern. That's the most common configuration. Or you'll have something like this, a chalice. You may actually have a church that has both a chalice and individual cups. In fact, that's probably more common than just having, I don't know a single church that just has a chalice, but when I go and I do visitations, for example, I bring a chalice with me when I'm visiting somebody in the hospital or somebody in their home, and that's usually what we use. But for churches, in America at least, there's usually these individual cups, and then sometimes there's also the communion chalice as well. So let's talk about reasons why somebody might be pushing for the use of the individual cups. All right, so one of the reasons given for using the individual cups is that it is the blood of Christ, no matter what vessel holds it. This is absolutely true. Even if you had plastic solo cups, even if you used your protein shaker to hold it, it would still be the blood of Christ. That being said, if this is your argument for why you use individual cups, why might you choose a cup like this over this, or like a solo cup instead? Why specifically would you choose a dedicated cup if the blood of Christ is there no matter what? The reality is that you want to choose an appropriate vessel for the blood of Christ. Even though it's the blood of Christ, you're still confessing something by what you put the blood of Christ in, how you regard it, how you handle it, that sort of thing. So if you were to pick an ideal vessel for the blood of Christ, what might that look like? If you've got a big cup like this, or what if you've got a bunch of these little teeny cups? I've never seen them before, but maybe they make these out of like gold or silver or something. Wouldn't that be amazing? So you've got an idea of like, if something is going to carry something as precious as the blood of Christ, it might look different than your average red solo cup. Another argument, another reason for individual cups is that some churches use multiple chalices. Chalice, what is the plural of chalice? They use multiple ones of these. I've seen these before. Bigger churches, they might have multiple chalice. They might have multiple flagons. Those would be like the pitchers or cruets, the smaller pitchers that have the blood of Christ. So if they're using multiple chalices, then that's basically the same thing as using multiple cups. If the argument is that you must use one cup, then no church is allowed to use more than one chalice. Is that the approach that you want to take? There's a difference, though, between individual cups where you've got like 40 or 100 of these things and multiple chalices where you've got 2 or 3 of these things. In the case of individual cups, you are confessing a sort of individuality. In the case of chalices, even if you've got one chalice, even if you've got 3 chalices, let's say, and you've got 300 people worshiping, if you've got 300 people being served in the service, if you've got 3 chalices, there's still a communal aspect to the drinking. It's still being passed around. Multiple people are still drinking from the chalice. So in the case of multiple chalices, there still is that communal aspect, whereas in the case of individual cups, it's purely individualistic. Now, if multiple people drank from these individual cups, then maybe you could start making a case. But at that point, like, why not just use a bigger cup? Like... Anyways, here's another argument, another reason why people might use individual cups. People might use individual cups because they're concerned with the spread of disease. This is a very common one. As far as I'm aware, and I've been told this multiple times from other people, there is no recorded outbreak of anything ever connected to the individual cups. That being said, if a person comes in and they're receiving communion and they're sick, and they're concerned about making other people sick. So out of that love of their brother and sister, the reason why they would opt for individual cups is because they don't want to make other people sick. Then I don't want to burden their consciences and say, no, you have to drink from the chalice instead. That could be a legitimate reason. You don't want to make other people sick. Now, whether or not that will actually happen is a different question, but I would say at least for the reason why, that's actually a valid reason to be concerned about your brother and sister, to love your brother and sister. Another reason I've seen for individual cups is, let's say somebody is extremely allergic to gluten or they have celiac or something like that. This is just the case for some people. I myself have a gluten sensitivity, whatever that means. I use the chalice, but there are some people where it's so severe that they're so concerned with cross-contamination that if they drink from the same cup from somebody who's just had bread in their mouth, that maybe this could cause a reaction. And in that case, they might want to use an individual cup. Again, I think that's probably valid. But is that the reason why most people are doing it is the question. All right. Another reason that I've seen pushing for individual cups, for the use of individual cups, is that a chalice is too Catholic. Now, I have heard this phrase, that's too Catholic, from so many different people on so many different issues. And it's like a superstition at this point. It's like, oh, I can't do that. That's too Catholic. I can't wear white after Labor Day. It's too Catholic. Just because something is Catholic doesn't mean that it's bad. You know what else the Catholics love? They love Jesus. So it's like, well, I can't pray to Jesus. The Catholics do that. That's too Catholic to pray the Lord's Prayer. It's like, are you kidding me? And besides, there's a lot of things that Christianity has done long before the Western expression of Christianity became Romanized, let's say, when there were newer additions to the theology that became the modern Roman Catholic Church. And part of these things was drinking from chalices, or drinking from a chalice, something like that. So to say this is too Catholic for, to use a chalice, I'm like, kings and stuff, they drank from chalices too. There are chalices throughout history. This is not an argument to say this is too Catholic. And even if it was just the Roman Catholics doing it, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong. What you might mean instead is that not that this is too Roman or too Catholic, but this is too traditional. Okay? There is a tradition behind it. Now, that being said, let's move on to some of the reasons for the chalice. Traditional. But just because something is traditional doesn't necessarily mean it's true or it's good or it's right. Something being traditional might have a history or a pedigree, but that doesn't mean necessarily that it's good and it's right and it's the thing to do. Something being traditional is what I'm saying is something being traditional doesn't automatically make it good. There are many bad traditions out there. But in this case, it's continuing an ancient practice that we hold in common with Christians that came before us. This is one of the reasons that tradition is important, because you, like many Christians before you, are drinking from a chalice. This is kind of an ancient form of things to drink from. It's not, a modern day I don't know, water bottle or whatever. So we're holding this in common with Christians that came before us. It confesses that we hold in common this practice, we hold in common this practice as well as the beliefs of the Christians before us. We are the continuation of the Christian church. We're not a new thing. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're doing the same thing that the Christians, I keep bumping this microphone. We're doing the same thing that the Christians before us have done. So this is why we embrace a tradition like this. All right, here's another reason. This comes from, I love this hymn. What God ordains is always good. So in your hymnal, it's hymn number 760. It's the third verse. It goes like this. What God ordains is always good. His loving thought attends me. No poison can be in the cup that my physician sends me. My God is true, each morning new. I trust his grace unending, my life to him commending. So in this, we are confessing that God is taking care of us even when we're receiving the sacrament. Consider for a moment 1 Corinthians chapter 11. In 1 Corinthians chapter 11, Paul warns and talks about people who have received the Lord's Supper unworthily. And as a result of receiving it unworthily, some of you, he says, have gotten sick and even died. So here's the question. If God is able to make people sick using the Lord's Supper when they are receiving it unworthily, is he not also able and not also likely to protect those using the Lord's Supper appropriately, faithfully, and worthily? Is he not going to bless these people in the same way he cursed the ones who used it unworthily? So you're concerned about, well, I don't want to use this chalice. It's icky. It might make me sick. Is that something coming from a place of emotion, or is that something coming from a place of faith? Like, consider why you are feeling these things. And if this is something where you expect God to protect you from it, or maybe you're doubting that God is going to protect you from this. All right, let's get into a couple of practical considerations. So if you were already concerned about the practicality of sharing a chalice with other people who knows what they have, diseases and stuff like that, let's look at this cup in particular. So this cup in particular, this is gold. I think it's gold plated on the inside, and I believe it's brass on the outside. This part is silver, and this is, you'll see it's a slightly different color metal on the inside. And this is a beautiful, wonderful cup. It costs, unfortunately, a lot of money because it's made of precious metals. And you want to know something nice about precious metals is they're antimicrobial. There's a reason that silver was used in surgical tools. If you are using glass, or even worse, if you're using plastic, what you're doing is you're using a material that is porous. This has little teeny tiny holes and air bubbles and stuff like that. So if you're worried about little buggies and stuff like that hiding out in your cup and making you sick, where you would have protection if you actually used a precious metal like brass or an alloy, like brass is an alloy of, I think it's like copper and something else, bronze or something. If you use a precious metal like brass, gold, silver, platinum, I don't know, palladium, maybe that's like radioactive or something. If you use a precious metal like that, you would actually be protected by using an antimicrobial material. Whereas if you're using something like this, a plastic cup, you're actually putting yourself more at risk, if that's the concern that you had about getting sick from using one cup versus using a different. Now, there are places that they use like clay or like pottery cups, and there's other ones that even use like wooden cups, and those would be even more porous. I've seen the clay cups before, and it always like confuses me. It's like I don't know, it's like dressing the Pope up in a t-shirt or whatever. It's like you're trying specifically to be humble. It reminds me of Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade, where he's trying to pick, which chalice is the true cup or whatever. And he picks up the simple chalice. And he says, this is a carpenter's cup or whatever. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, wait a minute, Jesus would have carried the cup of a carpenter along with him, like everywhere, or just to the Lord's Supper, which he had at somebody else's house, by the way. He just happened to have his cup with him or something. It doesn't make any sense. But if you're worried about porous materials, maybe stay away from the ceramic, maybe stay away from the glass and the plastic and materials like that, and gravitate instead towards something that's silver plated or gold plated or brass, something like that. There's a reason that brass used to be used in like door handles and stuff like that. Stainless steel is not antimicrobial. Brass is. All right, but that's kind of more of a practical consideration. All right, another practical consideration for using the chalice. By using the chalice, there are fewer individual cups for the altar guild to wash afterwards. So if you're using individual glass cups, the altar guild has to wash all these individual cups. Now, I have heard it said from some people that one reason we should have communion less frequently than weekly is so that we can give the altar guild less work to do, because we're burdening them with the task of taking care of these holy vessels. So we should put less of a burden on the altar guild by having communion less frequently. What I'm curious of is if those same people who would say we should have less frequent communion for the sake of the altar guild not having to work as much, if they would also push for everybody using the chalice so the altar guild doesn't have to wash the individual cups. I wonder if those same people would use that same argument in this instance as well. Another practical consideration is that when somebody uses a chalice, they can regulate how much wine they're imbibing, how much wine they drink. Some people drink more wine than others. I know some people who they can't drink as much and it irritates their throat or something along these lines, so they can only take kind of a sip of wine. So rather than when they have a cup like this and they drink maybe half a cup and they feel bad because they've left half a cup of Christ's blood and they haven't finished it all, rather than them worrying about that, if you give them the chalice, they can regulate how much wine they drink and only drink as much as they need. So why not let them use the chalice and drink as little as they were comfortable with drinking without wasting it? Now, something else to consider. The beauty of the chalice, the beauty of a chalice. Now, this plastic cup is not beautiful. Let's be real. I mean, I don't know, some art critic or whatever will disagree with me, but which of these is more objectively beautiful? A glass cup, nothing special about this, or an ornate chalice? Gold, silver, brass. Which is more beautiful? And we understand that the chalice is more beautiful. There's a reason behind it. It's not just because, oh, pretty is cool, but its beauty emphasizes the beauty and the value of its contents. Not many people drink from chalices on a regular basis. I mean, I do because I'm a pastor and that's just what we do. But chalices are special. So when somebody comes into a church to visit and they see a chalice up on the altar and they see it made of precious metals and ornately decorated, what do you think that this person is going to conclude about what is in the cup? What do you think they're going to think about what is in the cup? Do you think that this special cup, that they're going to look at this cup and they're going to see, this is a cup that, just somebody just drinks apple juice or grape juice out of? Do you think that's what they're going to conclude? Or do you think maybe they're going to conclude, wow, that sure looks special. Look at this. Isn't this amazing? This looks special. What is that? I bet something really special, really valuable is in that cup. It's got to serve some really important purpose. It might even be something that I want. So with the beauty of this vessel, we confess to one another and to visitors that the thing we share is valuable. The cup is valuable, but it's nowhere near as valuable as the stuff that is in the cup. The blood of Christ that is in the cup is infinitely more valuable. But using a valuable vessel like this reminds us how valuable the contents of the vessel is. Finally, something else to consider about a common cup is the communal aspect of it. Part of communion is community. It is sharing together the same meal. Now, in a society that we live in that preaches radical individualism at every turn, Christians set ourselves apart by preaching fellowship with one another. We call ourselves the body of Christ. We're different members of the body of Christ. We're a family. We meet together. We pray together. We sit together. We eat together. It might be a little uncomfortable for some people getting too close to one another, but by sharing a communion vessel together, we confess that we Christians are closer than the rest of the world is to each other. We are all one. We are all one in the body of Christ. We are drinking from the same cup, not a different cup for each member of the body of Christ. Like, oh, my finger has to drink from one cup, and then I get another individual cup, and my other finger has to drink from that. We are all part of the same body. We drink all of one cup. We eat all of one bread, I suppose. So a single cup for the whole of the body. What about some Bible verses? Let's get into some Bible verses. Now, in favor of individual cups, I actually found somebody use a Bible verse in favor of individual cups. They pulled up Luke 22:17, and it reads this, talking about Jesus. It says, "And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he said, 'Take and divide it among yourself.'" Now, they believe from this verse that it indicates that Jesus took a third cup and blessed it and divided it into smaller cups. So then he kind of poured the chalice. There's something called a pouring chalice. It looks like this, but it's got a spout on the side of it. And it's used to kind of pour into individual cups or pour into smaller cups. And they think that this is actually what Jesus did. So it was actually one cup, and then it was divided into other cups. Look, if you have a pouring chalice and you have a bunch of little tiny ornate chalices that each person can drink from individually, each poured from the same cup, that could be an effective way to split the baby, I guess. I don't think that that's exactly what this verse is talking about, but I get how somebody could come to that conclusion from the verse. Now, in favor of the chalice, there's other verses. One example of the verse is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 16. The cup of blessing that we bless, is it not a participation in the blood of Christ? So regularly it's talked about the one cup or the cup rather than the cups that we all each individually have. Now, again, the function is the unity. The focus is the unity. Now, like I said, I don't think the verse in Luke necessarily means what I just suggested, that Jesus had a bunch of individual cups that he poured a single cup into. But at the same time, I don't think that verse, the verse that talks about the cup of Christ, necessarily makes it less holy, let's say, or less effective when the blood of Christ is divided into these individual cups. I don't think that it makes it less effective at all. It's still the same blood of Christ. So I don't want to say, absolutely, it is a sin. You're not getting as much when you drink individual cups. I'm not saying anything like that at all. The conclusion is actually this. How you do what you do in your congregation matters. It is the blood of Christ, no matter what the vessel. But that doesn't mean that we were to just hand wave this away. It's just, to use the phrase, adiaphora. This is adiaphora. It's got no consequence, and that it doesn't matter at all. It does matter. Now, even if it isn't biblically, specifically commanded to use one kind of vessel instead of another kind of vessel, even if it isn't biblically commanded specifically to use one kind of vessel instead of another kind of vessel, we still have to take care for what we do and why we do it. So what I'm asking you to do, please, is to think long and hard about the why behind your communion practice. It is possible that some practices could be done better, or that there are practices that were already done and they're fine, but they were done for the wrong reasons. And God absolutely cares what is in the heart of the believer and the heart of the person rather than just what they are doing externally. Now, what you do externally, again, that matters too, but what matters more to God is what is in the heart. Now, in the church where I'm a pastor, we have a chalice that goes by. The communion goes like this. The host goes by first, and I take the host. An elder or a deacon takes the chalice by second, and then third, the individual cups come by. I recommend this practice to anybody who wants to invite new people to use the chalice if they haven't considered it before. Bring the chalice first before the individual cups. I would love it if everybody felt comfortable communing with a chalice. But out of love, the Bible commands us to make concessions to others. So if we have a member or a visitor who partakes from the individual cup, I have no right to burden their consciences where God has allowed Christian freedom. Rather, I am to rejoice because thanks be to God, Christ has delivered his saving blood to another believer and the blessing that goes with it. So love God, love your brothers and sisters, be patient and compassionate. Be passionate too, sure, why not? All the while, be intentional about what you do. Do it to the best of your ability and to the glory of God. God bless you all and take care.